the playbooks we've built our entire careers on as marketers are just being rewritten in real time with AI. We're going back to an era where marketing was about storytelling. Marketing was about generating like a feeling in people's kind of hearts and minds. It was about creating connection and building relationships. The corporate blog is doomed. That's the only way to say it. I tried to revive it and it didn't work out.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Evergrow Show, and today we have with us Anthony Kennada, who isn't just one of the most prolific and successful B2B marketers, but also the mastermind behind the entire category of customer success, which he pioneered at Gainsight, leading to a $1.1 billion exit. Anthony then spent time as CMO at Front, followed by his role as CMO at Hopin, steering the fastest growing startup in European history. After which he founded AudiencePlus, which got acquired by the Juice in early 2025. Anthony is now the founder and CEO of Goldenhour, where he helps brands design go-to-market strategies that reveal their humanity. He's the author of Category Creation and the godfather of turning B2B brands into consumer media companies. Anthony, welcome to Evergrow.
Awesome, Phillip. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive right in. I would love to ask you about some of the things that you're really excited about right now.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this, I think, before we hit the record button. Like, what a time to be a marketer. There's a lot of like doom and gloom out there because things are super hard right now. Everything is changing right now, and I think probably the biggest kind of interruption to our work, but also perhaps even how we find meaning and identity in our work is that the playbooks we've built our entire careers on as marketers are just being rewritten in real time with AI. So that comes with a lot of maybe wherever you are in the grief cycle with there, like a lot of feeling anxious about that, maybe even not believing that that's ultimately true. And hopefully you make it to the point of enlightenment on the other side of that practice and saying, all right, well, that means that I need to up level and rethink everything that I've known, and start kind of lending my part to what this next chapter of marketing looks like. And so I think it's a really exciting time, and I'm sure we're going to dive into all the micro parts of that in this conversation. But I think it's a really, really, it's almost like a renaissance of the practice of marketing that we all get to be a part of together.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting that, I would say even 5 years ago, coming into a company as a CMO or a head of marketing, you were bringing your playbooks with you.
Mm-hmm.
You were coming in saying, hey, this is what's worked. This is how we're going to fine tune it for this company. This is how we're going to go to market. And you're basically replicating, past successes. But I think
Yeah.
these days, it's just so radically different. You're coming in and not only are you relearning the entirety of the tech stack, but also the way that, attention is going and how people discover things. And it's so interesting, to your point where we are indeed spending so much time just relearning and researching and really trying to figure out what does marketing mean in this new era of AI.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think there's much more of a premium on first principles thinking rather than leaning on kind of best practices of old. And so, even if you're in a marketing role right now, how do you evoke or bring about more first principles thinking with your CEO, with your leadership team, with your sales leader? If you're interviewing for a job, like, this is becoming kind of more of how we're trying to get a sense of talent. It's like, all right, let's get on the whiteboard and figure out what could this look like in this new world. So I think everyone's operating from that same place of no one knows for sure. There's certain signal and things are starting to we're starting to see some patterns, but ultimately the ability to bring a beginner's mind to kind of how marketing would work at said company, I think is really kind of what was both attractive for new talent in kind of marketing leadership roles, but then also just I think how marketers can be successful kind of in this next chapter.
Absolutely. And speaking of kind of the next chapter, you've been pretty vocal about the fact that like the golden era of SaaS, things like predictable revenue, SDRs spamming inboxes, SEO arbitrage. Been pretty vocal about the fact that those things are dying. So if you were advising a Series A founder today, how would you recommend they approach building pipeline or generally sort of
Yeah.
building their brand in this new AI era?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's data to bring to the table here, right? Where 95% of any brand's audience, your brand, Mr. or Mrs. Founder, is not in market for your products or services today. The data shows that only 5% of a brand's given audience is. And so for that 5%, we need to be like incredibly tight in terms of how we're capturing that demand, how we're kind of ensuring that we're converting web traffic to, lead flow, that we're getting, in touch with those leads, really quickly. We're nurturing folks that have engaged. Like all that stuff is still true and good. And whether it's humans that are kind of leading that effort or humans maybe managing a set of agents in the future that's doing that effort, I think, I have a point of view on what that looks like. But what do you do about the 95? What do you do about the people that are within your persona or audience or industry or segment who have heard about you? They're, following you on LinkedIn. Like there's some kind of, engagement kind of more broadly, but they're not in market today. And the answer to that is you build brand. And, I'm starting to use this language about brand humanity, which is basically saying, how can we evoke these attributes of what it means to be human in order to build that relationship with our audience at scale? So how do we show up as authentic? We're in our respective homes here today on, virtual on the call. We're not in a professional studio necessarily, and we're letting the viewer into this place. There's something very authentic about that. How do we develop stories that aren't just uh, product positioning and messaging around our feature function, but how do we tell more of an emotional story about what our product will create in the lives of our customers? How do we express creativity? How do we build connection? How do we facilitate a sense of belonging within people within our community? These are the attributes that make brands memorable, stand out from the sea of sameness, and actually be known and hopefully loved kind of along the way. So that is how we engage the 95, so that when they are ready to buy, they're going to think of our brand first. They're going to sort of self-select into the 5%. And so that's, I think, the existential kind of conversation at the founder level. It's that brand is everything. It's almost too important of a job just for marketers to have, because that is how we become relevant, differentiated, and ultimately warm up our audience in order to drive them into a commercial conversation.
And it's been so funny to see the shift. Even the most hardcore direct response marketers are now leaning into brands so heavily, and it's becoming such an important aspect because, again, when everything is democratized, when everybody's got the tools and the resources, and there really is no more technological advantage, it really is the brand that, stands out, and brand humanity. I love that term. And you've mentioned before that it really is the idea that being human is the only moat against AI. But ironically enough, you've also obviously, pretty heavily pushed agentic AI software to,
Yeah.
potentially help with content and engagement. Where do you see that line being drawn, kind of between humanity and AI? And what is that perfect balance for you?
Yeah. The short answer is I'm very pro-human in the long run, and in fact, uh, making a lot of very personal kind of career decisions aligned with that belief. Um, but here's what I would say: I think that across the marketing kind of mix, 80% of what today we call marketing, you've named a couple of those kind of subcomponents, will be automated by AI agents in the next 3 to 5 years. And so what do I mean by that? Like paid ad optimization, website A/B testing, copywriting, like for the site, those types of things. Jobs to be done that are more transactional in nature or performance driven than more relationship driven. And so what happens there? Well, I think what happens is you have humans working at the job at the company who are subject matter experts, who carry the bag or whatever, who have, deep understanding of these channels, and they are employing a number of agents that, and again, maybe not today, maybe some experimental use cases today. I don't think there's a pervasive like runaway winner yet, but who are doing the work, and they're doing it at a PhD or better level, 24 hours a day. They're learning. There's, local memory. There's all of these things that really give it kind of just a better shot at success than hiring like a junior, paid media manager or whatever. And so I think that even though the executing the work is going to be, in my opinion, driven by compute for that part of the marketing mix, I still think it's a very important role for humanity to actually like own the outcome, build the relationships within the business, and manage these tools. But then you have the 20%. And again, this is editorial content marketing like this one, like this podcast we're on today, right? There's events. We can talk a lot about offline marketing and the importance of getting together in person. There's some of the kind of deeper brand research and brand strategy around emotional storytelling that all of these sort of elements that I think in a world where AI could do that work, like soup to nuts, end to end, we would still choose humanity to do that work, because of the taste, because of the need to be a body in person. I don't think we're all going to send a bunch of Optimus robots to meet and come up with some deals at a retreat center one day, right? Um, and so I very much think AI is going to augment that work. We'd be foolish not to kind of leverage technology for taking this long form asset and turning it into some short form clips and distributing it and ingesting the transcript to help create the title and description. Like we need to use these tools. Um, but I think that the broader kind of effort will be owned by humans. I think that does that work. So again, that's kind of just in marketing alone. But I think the broader kind of philosophical point is that, well, maybe we're going back to an era where that like this is really what marketing was before we got sort of
Mm.
over indexed on Google AdWords and some of these other things, where marketing was about storytelling. Marketing was about generating like a feeling in people's kind of hearts and minds. It was about creating connection and building relationships. And you could argue even that like in the advertising a golden age of the 1960s, we had a lot less marketers in the world before technology really disrupted even that channel. And so the question is, I don't think this is a jobs going away thing necessarily. Maybe in some roles in particular, but there's, I think, a chance for some to kind of like, uh, you know, expand kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis, master the tools and all of that. But I think there are some things that we'll look back and be like, I can't believe we used to hire somebody to do that. Like it happens in seconds now and it's perfect. Like this is incredible. And maybe that's okay. Like maybe that liberates us. And maybe that gives us an opportunity to focus on doing our best work and really focusing on that kind of brand humanity element that I think is going to be more timeless and kind of more impactful at scale.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so interesting that for so long, everybody said you should be a T-shaped marketer, right? You should have some
Yes,
knowledge of things and then you should go really, really deep in one specific vertical and be
yeah,
the subject matter expert there. But it seems like now almost the opposite is true,
I think
where I
so.
feel like the folks that are better off are, I've heard it called the comb-shaped marketer, where
Oh,
you kind
interesting.
of go a little bit deeper across everything such that
Yeah,
you almost kind of become more of a generalist than a
yeah, I think
specialist.
so.
And because these AI tools just enable us to do things so quickly, I mean, I am not a designer, but I have been absolutely pumping designs out left and right for all my needs, super
Nice.
quickly. And again, they're not perfect, they're not best in class, but they're good enough and they work for my
Yeah.
purposes. And I feel like that's actually happening across the board with, specifically in marketing in any area that you
Hmm.
look. It's like things are happening to the point where, the tools are enabling folks to participate in any field to some extent. And so it is a really interesting shift and definitely a very interesting flip of, how folks
Totally.
should be thinking about their own education and skills.
I think that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. I've heard it said somewhere else very similarly that generalists will do well kind of in this new world.
Yeah, I would love to double click. I mean, obviously, you were super early to this, but nowadays it seems like almost every B2B company wants to build a media company
Hmm.
internally. But a lot of these, corporate blogs, podcasts are kind of ghost towns, right? Like they kind of either kick off and they don't do anything for the company, or they just waste resources and that don't actually contribute to brand equity or the bottom line. What do you
Yeah.
think are the differences between companies that are doing this super successfully and then companies just aren't seeing any return from it?
So much to say. Do you have another hour by chance on the runtime here?
As much time as we need, sir.
Well, this was, for at least 3 years, my life's work dedicated to helping figure out how to solve this problem. And maybe it's important to say that, like, I think what we observed with Audience Plus, on the problem perspective, I think we really hit on something meaningful, which I'll talk about. But the product that we built wasn't the right product to solve that problem. And so I would argue that the corporate blog is doomed. That's the only way to say it. I tried to revive it, and it didn't work out. So I think um, that it's less of a infrastructure problem, turns out. Um, and it's much more of a mindset and um, a willingness to be relentless with content production, but more importantly, with content distribution. Because we think about kind of what are the moats that exist within companies. I think brand is a big moat, but even brand can mean many things to many people. I've heard others say, in almost a similar sense, distribution is a moat. And distribution today is not won by how it was when we were doing Gainsight. When we were doing Gainsight, it was like we need to buy a bunch of lists. We need to go scan a bunch of like badges at a trade show. We need to buy contact data and spam them in Marketo until our domain gets so I can't even add a calendar invite, right? Um, that was sort of how we built distribution in the past. In this new world, it's built through media, and it's happening primarily, not exclusively, but primarily on social. And so depending on your audience, wherever they are, it could be LinkedIn, could and social networks, X, Instagram, others. Could be content networks like YouTube, like the podcast channels as well. And it could be increasingly some owned platforms that are not your corporate website. That's Substack or Beehive or Patreon or these other kind of tools. Um, Community tools as well, like Circle. And I think what what is really interesting and compelling is you've got, you know, teen to early 20s creators that are like building massive audiences, and they've nailed something that the smartest marketers working at name your tech company can't figure out. Like, what is it? Like, what is it about it? And I don't think it's resources. At least if you're an upstart creator, like it's probably your iPhone, right? Or I don't know, you get some SLR camera and then it's just you and iMovie. Uh, so I don't think it's a resource issue. I think it's more of a cultural issue because it seems, one, very different than what we've done for a long time. This isn't SEO, AEO, like anything along those lines. It's not performance oriented content. It's editorial. It requires not just commitment from your spokespeople to make themselves available to do interviews or podcasts or create content or whatever. It requires distribution in the form of post-production editing that isn't just the long form asset, but also chopping it up, adding, some B-roll, making it feel quick, adding sort of the uh, subtitles. And then you got to be pushing uphill against an algorithm that is designed to not let your content be seen, basically. And so you got to play the game. And the game on X is different than the game on LinkedIn, which is different than the game on YouTube. And so you need someone within the organization, within the marketing team that has the charter to be able to be an in-house creator. You need a executive spokesperson that is willing to either A, make themselves available to be on camera, two, to be good on camera, and three, to be able to be okay with the marketing team shipping a bunch of stuff at scale that they're not going to sign off on every single like short form clip that goes out. Um, and that's hard. And CEOs are busy building products, serving customers, like advising on the roadmap, building a culture, like turning them into a creator too. Like that's a lot of commitment. And so um, I think that's to me, that's more of the disconnect on the media company thing. I thought it was about how do we send more people to our website and get them to fill out basically a subscription form. Turns out I don't think that's the problem. I think it's much more of a mindset, because you do see some of the best companies actually have figured it out and are figuring it out. They're outliers. And I think in many cases, a part of it is just sticking in the game long enough to start to see the fruits of your effort.
And it's so funny, again, to see a massive shift. I feel like no matter where we look, we're seeing these massive shifts. But, back in the day, it was you had to have the resources to produce the content. Then
Yeah.
you needed, approvals all the way down the chain, going through the legal department.
Yeah.
Then you needed to put it on some sort of media network, whether it be radio or television, or
Right.
even, in the beginning of online, everything was paid distribution.
Hmm.
But now what I've seen is that the algorithms have shifted such that even accounts with a tiny amount of followers are getting this crazy distribution push. There was recently on X, there was a brand new account that just decided to publish an article, and the contents of the article were, I wonder if this article thing is going to get a push, and let's see where this goes. And it got like 8,000 followers overnight, millions of
Wow.
impressions. And so basically, the game is completely changed, whereas you no longer need to make massive investments, but you do need to put the trust and the faith and the dedication and the consistency into continuously iterating and producing content. And you need to just show up. And I think showing
Yeah.
up is just such a big part of it. And at the same time, I think, like what you said, showing up consistently. Just because you tried something and it didn't work does not mean that it doesn't work. Because, like you said, there's so many brands that seem to have cracked the puzzle and seem to
Yeah.
have cracked the code and are experiencing amazing results. But I think it's just the continuous experimentation and iteration, and that's really what's going to lead to success over time. And I think not giving up too soon.
I think that's right. I think that's right. And I think it's important to be said that, or it feels like this is now like a mandate for your founder or your kind of spokespeople at your company. Cause, and again, everyone serves different audiences. If you sell to like go to market, there's a decent chance um, your audience is on LinkedIn. And I can kind of think about LinkedIn now almost like your trade show floor. Like if you're not there every day, posting something, which I'm guilty of not doing every day. I need to. Um, it's like you don't exist. Your competitors do, or whoever's posting is in the zeitgeist. And so this is no longer like a community management type thing where you hire like a junior kind of first time marketer to like post on Twitter 3 times a week. Like this is like how you're known and relevant. And I'll say this too. I love doing conversations like this, but playing this game, I actually don't love it at all. Like the game of like, all right, how many impressions did I get on this post? And oh, like, do I need another like different hook? And is my like, did I do too much of like a millennial pause on that video? And I need to cut it a little bit faster. It actually, maybe after 3 years of trying to figure it out, like burned me out a little bit, but I tend to be more introverted. I like these conversations or, small dinners and those types of things. Um, and I don't intuitively like get a lot of energy off of figuring out how to get more likes, but I have to. And so this isn't for any introverts maybe listening. Like it's just now a part of the job that we figure out how to get better at this, how to cut through the noise. So anyway, I think that's an important admission for several folks who maybe don't want to be creators, but feel like, understand kind of the business requirements that are driving it.
Yeah, and I'm actually, based on something you said, I'm kind of a big believer in anti-virality. So it's funny,
Mm,
I do these conversations and then, I do take the time to do the post-production and publish them and, schedule them out across the social media networks and,
hmm.
across YouTube. But for me, it's not necessarily as much about how many likes or impressions does it get. For me, it's about how much value is this adding to the
Mm,
right people that need this value. And so
that's
I
good.
know that this conversation isn't going to serve everyone. It's not a TikTok dance. It doesn't have the most
Ah,
popular,
we can
song of
make
the
it
year
one.
over. We could, yeah. But truly, I mean, I think like as long as in the back of my mind, I know that anything that I'm putting out is actually going to add value and going to
Yeah.
be interesting and actionable for a small, very, very small subset of the population that could use the advice and that could, actually implement it in their own lives or their own businesses to get value, then for me, I've already won. And I
That's
think
great.
because the audience sizes are smaller, obviously it just has to be more consistent. I need to show up every day. I need to make sure that the algorithms know exactly what I'm talking about, exactly
Mm,
who I want to talk to. And it does take some training and it does take some showing up and, getting 100 views on something that I spent, hours on. But at
I
the same
know.
time, there's also this long tail effect now that I'm seeing where you publish something, it doesn't get any visibility. Most of the time people go, "Oh, this didn't work." They delete it, which is a huge
Mm,
mistake actually. And then
yeah.
they say, "Hey, that thing didn't work for me. I'm not going to do that anymore." But what I've actually been seeing, especially across platforms like YouTube and even TikTok and Instagram Reels, is that content has this weird tendency to go viral months after it's published. For some reason, the algorithm
Interesting.
determines like this thing is timely. This thing makes sense right now for this audience pocket. Let's just give it
Mm,
another blast. And there's almost this like auto recycling of content that happens. So
yeah.
again, it's the showing up consistently. It's having faith in the fact that whatever you're putting out is actually adding value. And as long as I know that, it definitely helps me sleep at night and it definitely motivates me to wake up every day and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm going to record these. I'm going to edit these. I'm going to schedule these. I'm going to, spend the time
Totally.
and put in the effort."
Totally. No, I completely agree. And I think, yeah, it's just that was a nice reminder of like, why are we doing this to begin with? Because we approach this conversation from like the commercial side of all of it. Thinking this is how we build distribution, create a moat, all of that. But ultimately we're trying to help people and we're trying to, reach people with a message. And to the extent that we can do that, I think, these are wonderful tools and channels and ways for us to make an impact ultimately as well.
Absolutely. And I know we've talked a lot about the digital side of things, but
Yeah.
I'd love to come back to something that you mentioned earlier. You famously hosted the Pulse conference at Gainsight when you only had 20 employees. I mean, that is a crazy risk, but
Yeah.
obviously that paid off. And so, obviously not every brand or not every company can host their own conference, but I do see this, big reemergence, the resurgence
Yeah.
of in real life, especially in this like digital first world. How are you thinking about in real life? And if, you were advising again a Series A founder or even a pre-seed founder, how would you advise them to take advantage of in person without
Yeah.
necessarily having the budget to, throw a massive conference?
Yeah. And by the way, I did it again. We hosted Goldenhour at the conference with 10 full-time employees.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, if anything, hopefully that gives you a sense of my conviction behind why I think events matter. So, I mean, there's timeless elements of this, and there's very appropriate kind of AI as a not even AI, but just like why offline marketing generally in this next chapter of our practice feels like it's going to be increasingly more important. From a timeless perspective, there's something that happens when we get together in person, and no digital component can replace that. No digital program can replace that. I tried with Hopin for a year and a half or so, and the world wanted to get back together. And so I think there's something really important about that. and there's different formats to this. So, yes, we irrationally hosted a conference for over 300 people very early in our operations twice. Um, but there's high touch kind of executive forums that are more, smaller numbers, smaller budgets, all of that. There's the traditional kind of field marketing concept that you could riff on and can go beyond a steak dinner and do something a bit more experiential for that's scaled, and not something you have to kind of bet big on. But I think the underlying premise is, can we get a group of people together who are within our audience in person to talk about a topic that is not an explicit sales pitch about our product, but a topic that's a bit more relevant to what they're going through, and where would they be, where they'd be willing to kind of hear ideas and share ideas of their own and contribute to the conversation. And so from that lens, I would say anyone should prioritize some format of an in-person experience, um, early and often. It should be a core part of the marketing rhythm for the company. And again, it doesn't have to be these massive like moments. It'd be nice if you want to do it. But I think creating kind of just a rhythm of getting your CEO, your founder in front of customers and prospects, is just an important consideration, and it's timeless. Now, what else is going on? Well, we talked about content a lot today. Well, in addition to the noise that we see in our feeds now, AI generated slop content is everywhere. We don't even know what's real anymore. Um, Beyond that, we're inundated with dopamine, like infusing like notifications on Slack and on LinkedIn and in our email inboxes and everywhere. Um, we're just, I think, we're burnt out digitally from some extent to some extent. And I'm seeing a lot of trends actually in the like Gen Z community, I think, or generation, around even like flip phones are making a comeback now, because there's this concerted like effort to engage, at least for a time, in analog kind of life, and look back with some nostalgic kind of views of like the world before the internet. And so there is this resurgence happening around offline, around analog. And I also think an interesting kind of an unexpected element of this too is really happening in like the health and wellness kind of space, where we're seeing just this desire for people to like connect around other things than just social components. So self betterment, longevity, eating well, sauna, you hear, like all these things. And there's these like clubs that are popping up that are like wellness clubs around like sauna and cold plunging and like really nice third wave coffee and organic food. Retreats are happening, wellness retreats is like one of the biggest kind of markets within the broader kind of wellness space. And so I think the invitation for marketers is not only how do we think about building an event strategy, but how do we do it in a way that is like meeting the moment, where it's not just, again, steak dinners and like conferences that have thousands of people at them, but that are kind of engaging the whole human that's attending this thing. And surely you'll want to cover business topics and networking and all these sorts of things, but can we also like make it a really incredible experience that's worth getting on the flight for? Something that builds a shared memory and shared experience amongst attendees that kind of binds them together. And that's where I think it's a really exciting time to kind of brainstorm new formats, new types of things that we can bring into the business world, maybe borrowing ideas from the consumer context as well, and bringing that into the types of events and experiences that we'd want to create.
Love that I feel like we're going down the checklist of every single type of shift that's happening. We're talking about the digital shifts, the content shifts, the event shifts. Back in the day, it was always, all right, let's throw this conference. Everybody sits through the sessions, can't wait for the open bar. Everybody gets shit-faced, does what they do. And kind of that was the the status quo. That's how people
Yeah.
did events. And now, like you said, I'm seeing people do, hey, we're doing this wellness retreat where there's actually
Yeah.
going to be no alcohol, and we're going to spend a
Yeah.
few days doing yoga and sauna and cold plunging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, we're just eliminating so many of the variables that used to be so important. It's like, do you have the top shelf liquor, or are they just
Right.
serving bottom shelf? And now it's like, is there a sauna? If there isn't, I
No.
don't know if I'm going to go. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, this huge, huge strategic and tactical shift when it comes to
Yeah.
in real life events. And I feel like it's happening across the board. You said, like, with Gen Z. I mean, I'm seeing it within, kids I know, my nephews, my nieces. They call it IRL maxing, where they
Oh,
don't they
nice.
don't come to my house to hang out. I fully expect them to just be on their phone or be on their
Yeah.
iPad. They're like, "Actually, do you have any cardboard laying around? I'd love to build this, like, weird house out of cardboard." I'm
No
like,
way.
oh, man, like, this is the best thing I've heard all day. Like, I
That's
really wanna
awesome.
hang out with you and help you do that. So it does really give me, just a lot of positive sentiment about what the future looks like, and I
Yeah,
think,
totally.
it's slowly but surely unfurling in front of us.
Yeah. How exciting. That is so cool. And I've heard like this whole maxing thing I'm new to, but like IRL maxing, someone should buy that domain. I think that's a good one.
Totally, totally. I'm trying to embrace it myself too. I'm like,
Yeah,
spending 10 hours behind my computer screen. I'm like,
I
I should
know.
go IRL max. That's what I should do
Yeah,
right now.
totally. Totally.
So we spoke, obviously about a lot of these like high conviction bets that you've taken. You just threw a conference, you have 10
Mhm,
employees,
mhm.
and these are things that have worked out, thankfully, and, have paid dividends. But I would love to hear just, throughout your career, what are some of the most memorable mistakes? Maybe also high conviction bets, things that you thought were gonna absolutely crush it that didn't quite pan out the way that you expected? And then what were your learnings from those?
Got a lot. I'm trying to think like, the ones that are coming to mind, I guess there's two big ones, and I think we've danced around them, so we can kind of hit them head on. Um, Hopin was definitely a failure, right? I don't think there's any sort of hiding from that. Um, I would say that if I had a chance to do it all over again, I 1,000% would again.
Mm,
Um, so you brought it up, like at the time it was the fastest growing company in the world. And I think it might still be in Europe. I don't know if Lovables beat them at this point or not, but um, it was, and it happened in a historically relevant time as the pandemic was just wreaking havoc on the world, and the events industry was just completely upended. And so, as someone, we've talked a lot about events, you can hopefully get a sense that I'm very passionate about it. A chance to go lead marketing at not only the fastest growing company in the world, but the one that is doing the thing that I believe so deeply in. It was like a full body yes moment to go do that. And I would say over my time there, we built like the Hopin team, even beyond marketing, is probably one of the best teams to like never make it on the other side. Like the marketing team we put together. I'm like, man, I don't know if I could ever be a CMO again, because the caliber of that team I'll never match. Like it was so good. Um, and so you had a historic opportunity and you had the resources to go build an incredible team. And there was a million different things that went wrong. I would say probably the best summary statement, like a lot of things we did wrong for sure, but the best summary statement is when the world opened up again, virtual events just kind of stopped. We moved to more asynchronous video like this, live streaming, but not in the sort of like, experiential, like meet people in the hallway, virtual hallway type of experience that Hopin was pioneering. Um, so I think one of my biggest learnings, a lot of learnings there, but I think there's always this like, you gotta, I'm trying to think of the marketing lesson. I mean, I think part of it is how are we getting ahead of where the market's headed? How are we advising the product team on what we should be building or directions we should be going? How can we, I think maybe we over indexed on like demand came easy when I joined the company. And so we didn't invest a whole lot in revenue generation. We're like catching the leads that were coming and fulfilling demand versus creating it. And so, if anything, maybe we should have started earlier. Now, would that have stopped the existential kind of, trend? I don't know. But certainly, in terms of the things that I can control, and that was one thing that I. But the other one was Audience Plus. Right afterwards, sadly, it was the 1-2 punch. Um, again, like almost like no, like actually like no real regrets. I think starting a company is really hard. And if you're launching a product that is in a new category that no one is buying and you got to convince them that it's important to buy it. And on top of it, in our unique context, like we talked about, you're battling like a cultural thing within companies where they have to figure out how to create good enough content anyway and how to distribute it, let alone deploy a technology kind of platform to really make use of those first two sort of things. It was asking a lot of our customers. It was asking a lot of our market. And so it was, it was the wrong thesis, basic product thesis, basically. But again, no regrets in the sense that, like, first of all, I grew a whole lot, learning how to go from being an operator to being an entrepreneur, how to raise capital, how to run these board meetings, how to launch a company, how to build an advisory program, and how do you activate your advisors, and how do you build a product, all of it. And so I think the learning was incredible. I also think like the work was really good. The event, you mentioned Goldenhour, like still lives on now. That's sort of my next chapter that I'm focused on underneath that kind of brand equity that we built at AudiencePlus. So, I think those were kind of the main ones, but I'd say, I don't know. I mean, everyone's different, right? I think everyone has a different set of motivators. Across my career, like I've always felt like it's worth making high conviction bets, to use your language. And it just feels to me like, for my personality type, maybe, or however, like even with Gainsight, like, like life's too short. Like I'd rather do whatever I can to play a small part in making the future a little bit better. Um, and I feel like I can do that best and find that personal motivation when I try to swing for the fences on something. Not to say the work for like more kind of calculated bets and work isn't critically important. That's why we're all made differently and have different kind of, sets of motivations and skills and gifts and everything. So I don't look, I guess, I don't look at those opportunities with too much regret. It's just helping me, like, it's just context for how I think about what the next kind of decision is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that mindset. I wholeheartedly agree. First and foremost, if you're going to take bets, take big bets because, like you said, life is too short and there's only so much time that you have. And you could spend your time taking a million short, small bets that might not pan out into anything, or you
Yeah,
can take several concentrated big bets. Chances are something will pan out well beyond your wildest expectations. I think the other important thing to remember, and some of the smartest and most successful people in the world share this sentiment, that it is not a failure if you learned something.
totally. Yeah,
Learnings are so, so important, and they are absolutely the foundation of everything that we do and all the decisions that we make. So
yeah,
even if you failed at something, or, subjectively, everybody
yeah,
says you failed at something, if you learned something or if you had some great takeaways, yeah, I really don't consider that as a
yeah,
failure. Those are the silver linings that make the entire experience worthwhile.
yeah. What a unique gift and industry to work in, that in which failure is not like you're like doomed kind of a thing. Failure is, in some cases, it's even like applauded, or a badge of honor type of a thing. Like I feel like that's not common, like in the banking world or in other industries. But if you happen to work in technology, yeah, there's this kind of Silicon Valley ethos, that not geographically located, but across the industry, that like failure is okay. What did you learn, to your point, and how's that changing kind of what you do next, and what are you bringing with you? So how cool is that? That's a really cool kind of, that should give folks, I guess, a little bit of reassurance, or I don't know, help them feel comfortable maybe taking bigger swings in a world where they typically may not.
And I think it applies generally to business as a whole. Facebook's
Mm.
old ethos, move fast and break things. And, I think a
Yeah.
lot of really successful folks, again, share that sentiment. But even, the world where I come from, growth marketing, it's
Mm.
all about experimentation and failure. If you're not
Yeah,
failing
totally.
like 80% of the time, you're not taking good bets. You're not experimenting
Yeah.
enough. And I think it's important to have the hypotheses, to experiment on them, but also have the framework, right? Have the failure framework. We'll coin it here
Right.
today. It's
Nice.
know how to rapidly iterate, know how to take the data, reinforce the feedback loop. And again, if you're always incorporating those failures into your future roadmap, you're probably moving faster and more
Yeah.
successful than most people out there.
Awesome. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
I have a little bit of a crazy question for you. It's a
Right.
little
Yeah,
out
let's
of
do it.
left field, but I love this one. If you can get one message in front of every single founder and marketer in the entire world, what would that one message be?
So many ideas. I've got like I got to pick one. There's one like professional idea I have, and then there's one more of like a life lesson that I've kind of gathered here. I'm going to go with a life lesson, and it's maybe paradoxical to what we just talked about in a way. Maybe I'll start with a story. Like, I at Gainsight was like, this was my like chance to quote unquote make it, right? And so I was very transparent with my CEO that I wanted the CMO job. I didn't want to get hired over. Success for me would be that like I would always work directly for Nick. And what he asked for in exchange was, uh, he's like, "Are you willing to receive feedback?" And I was like, "Yes, for sure. Tell me everything. I want to know the thing before the thought fully forms. I want to know it, so I can get better. I can figure out how to solve the problem that you want me to solve." And he was like, "Okay," and so that became kind of a big part of how we worked together. And there was this one moment we're on a walk and talk, kind of walking one on one. Um, and I was just spinning. I was spinning on something he had said or an email he had sent, or kind of, and I think we've all been there where you get the Slack message or the email and your whole world comes down. And this is a judgment on my very identity, is sort of how it feels. And Nick looks at me as I'm sort of just like emoting in front of him, basically. And he goes, "Anthony, it's just a job." And I was like, "What?" Like, wait a minute. Like, we're on the hook for a number, or we've got a conference coming up, or we've got like major things we've got to figure out. You're next on the line, my next on the line, like 1,000 employees next are on the line. What do you mean it's just a job? And that really helped me counterintuitively, like, just reframe my relationship with work. And so it lives with me to this day, and that the work we do is super important. The mission that we're on, the team that we're kind of stewarding their lives and careers in a way, all of that is like really important. But it's just a job. Your health, your family, your relationships, like, these are the things that um, ultimately matter most in the context of life. And again, work's a very important part of that mix. But I would encourage, like, I get a little nervous with like the 996 kind of message and all of that. I'd really encourage people to think about life as more than just our work, and find a healthy relationship with it, where we're doing our best to sort of like make the world a better place, but we're also sort of taking care of ourselves and our close kind of community. along the way as well.
Such a beautiful sentiment, and I feel like it's so foundational. There's Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Hmm.
There's also this hierarchy of wisdom, as I like to
Mm,
think about it. And
yeah,
as you go through life, you kind of learn these valuable lessons. And that is something that I think, it hits different people at different times. And
yeah,
unfortunately, sometimes, certain people just never get hit with that sentiment. But
yeah.
I do remember it was completely life-changing for me when I figured that out, that, like,
Mm,
nobody died. No,
yeah,
nothing so
yeah,
drastic or monumental happened that life is over. It really
totally.
is just work, and we have to show up, we have to try our best, but at the end of the day, there's so many things that are so much more important that actually feed into the quality of work. If you don't
Totally.
have
Yeah,
health, if you don't have happiness, you're not gonna show up the best that you can
yeah.
possibly show up, and so thank
It's
you for
actually,
sharing that sentiment.
of course, and it's actually paradoxical in that, like, having a day where we IRL max, where we get away from the computer, turn off Slack. I found that if I can, I try not to work all weekend, every weekend or anything, but like taking one day to completely disconnect counterintuitively makes the other 5 to 6 days more productive. And so I do think like the role of rest and community and these types of things are just so important, not just for our betterment, personal betterment, but it makes us better at what we do at work as well.
Yeah, it's the pattern interrupt. It's what we try to do as marketers, but it's, the IRL pattern interrupt. If you just
Yeah.
keep doing the same thing day in, day out, there's no way for you to get a different perspective or for your brain
Yeah.
to function differently or think differently. But when you break that pattern, you give yourself some time to just refocus and recenter, I mean, you come back harder, better, faster, stronger
Totally.
every single time without fail.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Anthony, this has been one of my favorite conversations, I have to say. I
Awesome.
feel like we've covered the entire gamut of every shift we're seeing in business, in life, in general,
Mm,
and so I really wanna thank you for coming on today and sharing your wisdom with us, and if people
of
want
course.
to follow your journey or see more of your content, where should they look?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably where I'm spending most of my time. And building a lot of things this year, kind of, but LinkedIn would be the best place to kind of follow along.
Awesome. Well, Anthony, thanks again for coming on. I can't wait to get this out into the world. And
Thanks,
as
Philip.
always, have an awesome one and take
Thanks,
care.
man. You as well. Thank you so much.